Okay, so today's October 14th, 2025, and we're not going to waste any time. We're going to cut right through the noise and break down the 10 biggest stories that are shaping our world right now.
So let's just jump right in with a big question. Think about it. With everything going on across the planet today, what is the single most important event? You know, the one that has the most immediate, the most far-reaching impact.
Well, here's your answer. The number one story today is a historic breakthrough agreement in Gaza. And this is a moment that's been years in the making, one that could genuinely reshape the entire Middle East.
So what are we actually looking at here? It's a massive prisoner for hostage exchange that has finally secured the release of the last known living hostages. And after 2 long, devastating years of conflict, this isn't just some pause. No, people are talking about this as a potential end to the war. The impact is huge, and it's twofold. First, it brings immediate, desperately needed humanitarian relief to Gaza, and second, it's forcing a complete rethink of Western diplomacy in the region.
All right, so from that major breakthrough in the Middle East, we're going to pivot to 2 other critical stories, a terrifyingly high risk of a nuclear catastrophe, and, on the other side of the world, deepening political paralysis.
So story number 2 is a really chilling reminder of the war that's still raging in Ukraine. The Zaporizhia nuclear plant, it's teetering on the brink. It's facing a critical power outage that puts the entire region and, honestly, way beyond, in serious jeopardy. I mean, listen to this. The International Atomic Energy Agency is warning of, and I'm quoting here, a nuclear safety incident with regional and global consequences. That's not something you hear every day. They're desperately pushing for local truces just to get the external power back on. This isn't some far-off threat, folks. It's an accident waiting to happen, and one that doesn't care about borders. It would affect millions.
Okay, so from a crisis of external power, let's turn to a crisis of political power. What's this number all about? 2 weeks. That's how long the U.S. federal government has been completely shut down.
Yep, now in its 2nd week, this thing is on track to be one of the longest shutdowns in U.S. history. And while public services are frozen at home, the global impact, that's just as severe. It's sending a signal of instability to the entire world, rattling markets and this is crucial, it's hamstringing the U.S.'s ability to respond to the very crises we're talking about right now.
Okay, so now let's zoom out a bit and look at entire regions grappling with escalating instability. We're going to start with a look at 3 really critical situations unfolding across Africa.
It's like a wave of crises is just sweeping across the continent. First up, in Madagascar, you've got the president fleeing a military rebellion, which could spark a humanitarian emergency. Then, in South Sudan, fighting has flared up again, creating what the UN is calling a growing catastrophe. And finally, in the Horn of Africa, tensions between Ethiopia and Eritrea are ratcheting up, pushing the whole region towards what could be a terrifyingly large-scale war. You see the pattern here? 3 different places, 1 common theme: profound, dangerous instability.
All right, shifting gears to the Americas, a completely different kind of crisis is unfolding. A massive storm, a nor'easter, is just battering the U.S. East Coast. We're talking severe flooding, destructive winds, and this is just the latest event in what has already been a very active hurricane season.
But here's the thing. These events don't happen in a vacuum, right? While the U.S. East Coast is literally underwater, Mexico is dealing with its own deadly floods and a probe into the killing of civilians by soldiers all at the same time. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's that natural disasters aren't just weather events anymore. They're what we call threat multipliers. They pile on top of existing security problems and strain governments to their absolute breaking point.
Okay, for our final section, let's pull the camera way back and look at the high-level moves of global powers. We're talking about the economic and diplomatic chessboard where the next big plays are being made.
So, our 8th story takes us to the big meetings of the IMF and the World Bank. Now, normally, this is a place for, economic planning. But this year, they're happening under a huge cloud of geopolitical tension.
And at the heart of all that tension is the economic friction between the U.S. and China. You've got 2 completely competing visions for the global economy clashing head-on. And the result? It's volatility. It's instability that affects businesses, jobs, the price of everything you buy. Because this high-level friction, it creates very real-world consequences for supply chains everywhere.
But you know what? It's not all tension and conflict. Our final story is actually one of de-escalation, as 2 major powers try to rebuild a really fractured relationship.
India and Canada are taking some pretty important steps to mend their relationship. This all comes after that intense strain following the killing of a Sikh separatist leader, so they've agreed on a three-step roadmap. First, they're going to establish a new framework for how they relate to each other. Second, they're going to directly tackle the core conflict. And finally, they're hoping to restore vital cooperation on trade and counterterrorism. It's a delicate diplomatic dance for sure, but a really crucial one.
So, after all that, 10 major stories, what does our world look like today in just a single snapshot? Well, political crises are taking up the biggest chunk, about 40%. And the rest? It's an even split between diplomacy, armed conflict, and natural disasters. The picture's pretty clear, isn't it? We're living in a world of intense and competing pressures from every direction.
So think about that. We've just covered 10 major global events, all from a single day. Which brings us to a final, really crucial question. What does it tell us about our future when a normal day looks this volatile? Something to chew on.